It was a calm Sunday evening on September 28, 1879. In the remote countryside of Decatur, Michigan, the Morris farmhouse stood quietly along Little Prairie Run Road. Inside, Charles and Esther Morris were settling down for the night. At 8:30 p.m., the couple retired to bed, unaware that their peaceful world was about to be shattered. Around 9 p.m., gunshots pierced the still night air. Within minutes, Charles and Esther Morris were both dead, murdered in cold blood inside their own home. Charles was found on the front porch with 2 bullets in his neck and 1 in the chest. Esther had been shot in the bedroom, then ran to a closet in a desperate attempt to hide. There, the killer shot her 3 more times. The only other person in the house that night was their young employee, Jeannie Bull. She claimed to have heard nothing. The next morning, she told the farmhand that she found Mr. and Mrs. Morris shot to death. Charles on the front porch, Esther lifeless in the bedroom. Nothing of value had been taken. Gold watches and cash were left untouched. But one thing was missing: a horse. Around 9:30 that night, a neighbor named Charles Rosewarne saw a man riding past his property. The rider wore what Rosewarne described as a funny hat. Days later, the horse was found abandoned in South Bend, Indiana, with a strange, fresh brand on its flank. In a heartbreaking twist, it was later revealed that Esther Morris was pregnant at the time of her death. The brutality of the murder shocked the entire community. The Morris farmhouse was isolated. Neighbors lived more than half a mile away. Whoever had committed this crime had come with deadly intent and vanished just as quickly. The renowned Pinkerton Detective Agency was brought in to solve the case, but even with their expertise, the murder remained unsolved. Suspicion turned towards a former hired man named Riley Huntley, who had been dismissed by Mr. Morris 2 months earlier for drunkenness. Yet, those who knew him insisted he bore no ill will. Theories emerged. Some believed Charles Morris had gotten up to answer a knock at the door and was ambushed. Esther, hearing the shots, tried to defend herself with a revolver, but fled in a panic and was hunted down in the closet. The crime was methodical, personal, and merciless. 2 days later, on September 30th, the funeral was held at Anderson Cemetery. Over 2,000 people came to pay their respects. The brutal double homicide left a scar on the small town of Decatur, one that would never fully heal. In the weeks following the brutal murder of Charles and Esther Morris, suspicion began to swirl. Among those questioned was a former hired man, Riley Huntley. He had been fired by Mr. Morris earlier that summer due to drunken behavior. Now, with the pressure mounting and suspicion turning toward him, Huntley pointed the finger at someone else, a local man named Floyd Smith. On the night of December 17, 1879, Floyd Smith was taken into custody. He was arrested by Constable Botsford, with help from a deputy named Scott Smith. Blinded and silent, Floyd was led out into the freezing woods near Decatur. What followed was not justice, but brutality. Out in the dark woods, a rope was thrown over a tree limb. Floyd was hoisted into the air, strangled, then dropped. Again and again, they repeated the act, 4 times in total, demanding he confess to a murder he insisted he didn't commit. His body bruised, his neck torn, Floyd Smith never gave in. Floyd survived, but barely. His body was badly battered, his spirit broken. He left Decatur hoping to start anew, but the damage lingered. His wife, overcome with trauma, passed away not long after. And though many questioned his involvement in the Morris murders, Floyd never changed his story. Years passed. The murder remained unsolved. And Floyd Smith, scarred in body and in memory, held fast to his innocence. On his deathbed, with his final breath, he repeated what he had said all along. He had nothing to do with the killings. Levi Weeks was born in 1776 in the quiet town of Greenwich, Massachusetts. In 1798, he left home and headed to New York City, hoping for a new beginning under the guidance of his older brother Ezra, a respected and powerful builder. What awaited Levi wasn't just opportunity. It was scandal, suspicion, and a murder that would make him the prime suspect. It was the winter of 1799 when 22-year-old Elma Sands vanished into the cold New York night. She told her cousin that she was to be secretly married that evening to a man named Levi Weeks, a promising young carpenter she had been courting. But Elma never returned home. Days later, some of her belongings were discovered near the recently constructed Manhattan Well in the desolate Les Bernard Meadows. On January 2nd, 1800, her lifeless body was pulled from the icy depths of that same well, with her throat slashed. Her tragic fate ignited one of the most sensational murder trials in early American history. The public was outraged. The suspicion fell squarely on Levi Weeks, the last known person to be seen with Elma. Rumors swirled, and he had been spotted near the well just days before the murder, measuring its depth. The case seemed open and shut, but Weeks wasn't without powerful allies. His brother Ezra, a wealthy and well-connected builder, secured a legal dream team, including none other than Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, fierce political rivals who found themselves, remarkably, on the same side of the courtroom. Presiding over the trial was Chief Justice John Lansing Jr., while the prosecution was led by the future New York Mayor, Cadwalader David Colden. The courtroom was packed. The city watched as evidence was presented, witnesses were cross-examined, and reputations hung in the balance. Then, in a shocking turn, after just 5 minutes of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict: not guilty. Mary Mormon was born into a German-American Catholic family, living in a tight-knit, working-class neighborhood. Her childhood was humble, marked by simple joys and quiet struggles. In 1866, tragedy struck when her father, a hard-working shoemaker, passed away. He left behind a grieving wife and 5 children. Mary's mother was now alone, struggling to keep the family together. It was just another evening on Orkney Street in West Kensington, better known back then as Norris Square. Children laughed and played under the fading sun. Among them was 6-year-old Mary Mormon. Witnesses later recalled seeing a strange man approach Mary, take her gently by the hand, and lead her into a nearby alley. She never came home. 2 days later, on September 8, 1868, Mary's lifeless body was found in a sunken city lot. The city was stunned. Panic and heartbreak swept through the community. Police rounded up several suspects, but all were eventually released. The case, for a time, went cold. On September 10th, Mary Mormon was laid to rest at St. Boniface Catholic Church at Masters and Diamond Street. Newspapers described the scene. The entire neighborhood was packed with people. The church was densely crowded. Mary's murder had become more than a crime. It was a tragedy felt by an entire city. Just blocks away from the Mormon home, a young barber named John F. Hanlon Jr. was beginning his new life. 20 years old, recently married, he lived with his wife and mother on 5th Street, where he ran a barber shop from the front of the building. Across the street at 20446 North Orkley lived the Mormons. No one knew it yet, but Hanlon's name would soon be tied forever to the murder of little Mary. John Hanlon was born in 1848, the same year his family fled Ireland during the Great Hunger. They were devout Catholics, like the Mormons. In March of 1868, just months before Mary's death, John married 18-year-old Anna Kelly. By all accounts, he was a quiet, hard-working man. But darkness doesn't always show its face, until it's far too late. Mary Mormon was among the first to be laid to rest at the newly opened New Cathedral Cemetery. But even in death, her journey wasn't over. Later, her remains were moved to St. Anne Catholic Church Cemetery, closer to the community that mourned her. Her name lived on in headlines across the globe. The murder of little Mary Mormon had become an international sensation. A year after Mary's death, a man calling himself Charles Harris was arrested for attempting to touch a 10-year-old girl. But Charles Harris was a lie. The man was actually John F. Hanlon, the barber from 5th Street. He was convicted and sentenced to 5 years in prison. While serving his sentence, Hanlon was recognized by police. They had a plan. His cellmate was persuaded to gain Hanlon's trust and his secrets. What came next shocked investigators. Hanlon reportedly confessed to murdering Mary Mormon. Hanlon was brought to trial in late 1870. Despite his earlier confession, he never admitted guilt in the court. But the jury needed no more convincing. John F. Hanlon was found guilty of murdering little Mary and sentenced to hang. On February 1st, 1871, he was executed by hanging at Philadelphia's infamous Moyamensing prison. He went to his death without ever confessing to his accusers. Hanlon was buried at Cathedral Cemetery, his resting place not far from the girl whose life he had taken. Later, his remains were moved to St. Michael Catholic Church Cemetery, quietly and without fanfare. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found this video entertaining. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out and lets you know when new content drops. Don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment. I love hearing from you guys. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.